All right, everybody, welcome to one more session on AWS Solutions Architect. Okay, let us look into the agenda for this particular session. In this particular session, we will create a web server and connect that with the RDS database. Okay, that is one hands-on exercise that you're going to do. And the second one, we will see how to create and connect with Microsoft MySQL Server engine. Sorry, Microsoft SQL Server DB instance. Okay. In the previous session, we looked into how to connect with MariaDB, how to connect with MySQL instance, right? So we'll also look into another engine which is Microsoft SQL Server DB instance. Okay. So before that, let us do this hands-on exercise, creating a web server and connect that to a RDS database. First of all, let me explain you the architecture of this particular uh, problem statement. Let me switch to my whiteboard. Okay, what you're going to do is that inside the AWS region, let's consider this as AWS region. Inside this, we are going to create a VPC. I mean, we are going to use the default VPC, but I'm just putting it for the architecture. And inside that, there'll be two subnets. One is a private subnet, one is a public subnet. Okay. Now I'm going to create a RDS instance here. Okay. MySQL server basically. I'm going to create a MySQL server here. And then I'm going to launch a EC2 instance. And this EC2 instance, I'm going to make that as a web server. Okay. And install a simple front end page. Okay. Now you're going to connect this database with this EC2 instance. Now, as soon as now let's say to this EC2 instance, user can connect with this internet gateway. Okay. Once the users access this EC2 instance, and if they input any data, that has to be updated in the RDS MySQL database. Okay. That is what we are going to achieve with this hands-on lab exercise. Okay. Let me first make a list of the steps that we need to do. Okay. First steps. Create a DB MySQL DB instance. Okay. Next, create a EC2 instance. Okay. Now, let me update the steps as and when I implement that. First of all, let me create these two: MySQL DB instance and EC2 instance. First of all, I'll create a EC2 instance because when I'm creating a MySQL instance, I have to select it has to connect to this particular EC2 instance. Let me go to my AWS console. Let me go to this service called as RDS. Let me click on this RDS. Now we already created this yesterday. Let me go a little faster here. I want to create this in a region called as North Virginia. So let me change that region here, North Virginia. Okay, now I'm in a North Virginia region. Select this option called as create a database. Okay, I will choose easy create, that is fine. And I want to create MySQL server. All right, and then let it be a free tier. I'll give the name of database as my demo. Let's say my web database. Okay, and I'll give the username as, okay, that's my username. I have given a desired password. Okay, I have to connect this to an EC2 instance. I don't have an EC2 instance. Let me create that. Okay, let me go to EC2 instances here. Okay, let me click on the EC2 instance. All right, go to instances here. Select option launch instance. Give my web server. Okay, my web server. That is the name of the instance. Okay, select Amazon Linux as the AMI, and I will choose. Okay, I'll choose one of the key pair demo. That's okay. And then I want to make this as a web server, right? So I have to open HTTP and HTTPS ports. All right, select launch instance. Now this instance is creating. Let's go to the instance. Okay, this is my web server. This is the instance. If you see, the instance state is pending. Okay, now the instance is running. All right, now let me go to the database here. Saying passwords didn't match. Let me change. All right, now set up EC2 connection. I'll say connect to EC2 compute resource. Let me choose. This is my web server is the EC2 that I have created now. Select that. Okay, view default EC2, rest all are fine. Select option create database. All right, now the database is getting created. Okay, if you see, my WebDB is the database I am created. Now you see that the database is getting created. All right. Now there are a couple of things that we need to do on this particular EC2 instance. By the time that database is created, let us connect to this EC2 instance and do the make it as a web server and do all other install all of the required software. Okay, now let's say I'm connecting to this EC2 instance. So I want to connect to my database, as well as I want to connect to my I want to make this as a web server. All right, so change to sudo user root user sudo let me change to root user. All right, now let me install sudo dnf update hyphen y. Enter. Okay, this is saying that everything is up to date. There's nothing to install. Now let me install PHP web server in this. Sudo dnf install -y httpd php, okay, MySQL MariaDB 105. Enter. Okay, there's a syntax error. It should be MySQL I. Okay, now it is basically installing the MariaDB, Apache web server for PHP and MariaDB software by using this particular command. All right, it is successfully installed. There is no issue with that. Now let me start the service called as httpd sudo systemctl start httpd. Okay, now the service httpd started. Now I want to enable this service. Why do we need to enable this service? So basically, when if a server is restarted, right, this service will not be active. Then to make sure, even if the server is rebooted, for this service to work, we need to enable this. Okay, enter. Now this service is enabled. Now let me give some permissions to the Apache web server to this user ec2-user. Okay, let's say sudo user mod -a -g Apache ec2 user. Okay, we are changing the permissions for this user. Okay, let me say exit and let's see groups. Run the command called as groups. Then we can see ec2 user admin will systemd journal. Okay, so that means the user is added to that particular group. All right, now let me give some permissions to /var file or /ww folder. Sudo chown -r ec2 user apache /var/www. Enter. Okay, that means I'm giving ownership of this user to this particular folder. Now let me give some permissions. To give some permissions, I will use chmod. I will use chmod 2775. Okay, /var/www. And then let me use find /var/www hyphen type. So all these syntaxes are basically I'm giving ownership and access to the user ec2 user. Okay, -d execute as sudo, okay, chmod 2775 and then a flower bracket / enter. Okay, now basically changing the directory permissions of var.ww and its subdirectories to add group write permissions and set the group id on the subdirectories that we are going to create in the future. Okay, now let me give a recursively changing the permissions of the files. How do I can give that? I can use for the files, for D it is directory, for type F stands for files. Sudo chmod, I will give the file permissions as 0664. Okay, and then enter. So we have given the permissions for directory, we have given the permissions for file. Now let me go to the folder cd slash var slash www. Okay, and let me also go into the, if I see ls here, there's a html folder. Let me go into cd html. Okay, now here let me create a file called as vi db.inc dot php. Okay, db.inc.php, this is a file that I am creating. Enter. What I have to give here, I have to give my database details that this server has to connect to. Okay, now I have the code here. Okay, I'll copy this, go back, paste. Okay, now the DB server, I have to give the database endpoint. Let's see our database is created or not. Okay, our database MyWebDB successfully created. If you see, I have an endpoint here. Connect to this endpoint. Okay, and instead of the update that in the place of database endpoint. I already copied it. Let me go here and paste it. Okay, this is my endpoint. And the user, when I'm creating a database, I have given a user, right? Let me replace the name with the username. And the password, replace the password with the password. Okay, and database name. So this database, we have to connect to that particular database and create this database. Okay, let us say I will give the database name as emp. Okay, we have to create that database. All right, now escape and save it. Okay, now our dbinc file is created. Now let me log into this server in another window also. Sudo su. Okay, now what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to connect to that server, connect to that MySQL server, and then create the database called as emp, because we have not created the database called as emp, right? I need to create that. So to connect to that server, I can use the syntax MySQL -h and my endpoint. Let me paste my endpoint. Okay, this is not my endpoint. Go to database, copy this, come here, give the endpoint name. All right, and it would be -p, the port name, -u, my username, and -p for password. Enter the password, enter. Now I am logged into MySQL RDS database. Now let's see any databases are there or not. Show databases column. You see, these are the different databases which are there. Now let us create a new database. Create database. Uh, I will create the database by name EMP because that is what we have given in our file. Enter. Okay. Now the database EMP has created. Let's see show databases. I have this database called as EMP. Okay. That is more than enough for us. All right. Now let me make a note here. Okay. We created MySQL DB instance and then connected to the database, connected to the DB, and then we created a database. Okay. Uh, we created a MySQL database instance. We connected to the database. I mean, we connected to this database instance. In the database instance, we created a database. Okay. Okay. In the EC2, what did we do? We installed PHP MySQL client. Okay. And we created a file by name, created a file db.inc.php. Okay, there we have given all the database details in this particular file so that this server can communicate with this database. Okay, that is what we have given. And now I will create one PHP file, okay, for our website to be up. I have that code. Let me show that to you. Okay, I'll explain this code uh, once we see the output. Okay, let me go here. Let me copy this. All right, let me go to my server. In this server, okay, here let me create a file by name levelup.php. Okay, so it will be vi space levelup.php. Enter. I copy paste. Save it. Okay, I saved this page now. Now let me take the IP address of this particular server. Okay, this is my server. Let me take the public IP address of the server and paste there, and then give the file name. It is levelup.php. Okay, now you see there's a web page that is coming up. Now whatever data that we enter here, that should be updated in the database that we have created. Okay, now let me enter a name, and let's say I'm entering the address as Hyderabad. Add data. Now you see in this the data is added. Now let's say the next one, I want to add one more name. Okay, Bangalore, and then add data. Let me add few more names. Okay, I'm adding Suresh, Sita. Okay, Sarita. I'm adding couple of more names. Pooja, Suma. So all these entries will be created in the database. Okay. So let's say these are the couple of things that I have added. Now let us connect to that particular database. Okay, let me connect to that. The syntax would be MySQL dot h. Let me copy the endpoint, paste, hyphen p, hyphen u, hyphen p. I'll give the password, enter. Now you see I'm in this database. Now we know that we have created a database by name EMP, right? I'll say use EMP. I'm there in EMP. I'll say show tables. Now automatically there will be a table that will be created. That is there in our code. I will show that to you. Show tables. Now you see there's a table by name employees. Okay. Now let's say I will query the data. Select star from the table name is employees. Okay. Let me copy this and paste. Give a semicolon, enter. Now you see all the employees data which I have entered in this application is visible in this particular database. Now let's say let me enter one more. Let me enter Pawan, address let's say Bangalore, add. Now let me add one more, Krishna, Hyderabad. Okay, I'm adding this data. Let me go here. Let me run this query one more time. Now if you see those two new records also has is visible here. Now let me write some other queries. Let's say select star from, okay, let's say I will use the same thing, select star from employees, where the column address, okay, where column address is equal to Hyderabad. That means I want to see only the people from Hyderabad. Okay, enter. Now you see you will be able to see the records only from Hyderabad. Similarly, if you give Bangalore, you will see only the records from Bangalore. That is how you can do all the CURD operations in the database. Okay, now let me show you the code and explain you guys how this is possible. Okay, my code is there here. Okay, let's see here. What is there in this code? I'm saying body welcome to level up. So as soon as we see this, okay, welcome to level up is displayed here. Okay, now what we are saying here, if the connection failed, we, you remember in a inc file we have given the server name, username and password, right? So it will try to connect to the server immediately. If it fails, it will say failed connect to the SQL server. Okay, if it is not failed, it will verify whether there is a table by name employees is existing or not. Okay, and it is using a API called as post method to input the name and address. Okay, and it is showing in this particular PHP file, it is saying that input form, the form should contain tab called as name, tab called as address, maximum send. This is the whatever you see on the main page, right? That is the code for this. Okay, if you want to add multiple columns to be displayed, let's say if I want location, or let's say email to be displayed, here we can add one more line for the email. Okay, and how the border should be displayed. All right, and so here insert into whatever the new data that you are entering, it will use something called as, yesterday we saw about insert values, right? How to insert values. So again it will use insert into the name of the table and the values, whatever values the user gives it. Okay, now if there is no table, what it will do, it will create a table by name employees. Okay, it will auto generate the IDs. We did not give any IDs, right? It will auto generate IDs and it will take the name and address. Okay, that is what that particular code which I have given there. Okay, and this is how we will be able to create This is how we'll be able to connect a relational database to a front end a website. Okay, so we created a file, install php, install mysql, created a file, uh, installed web server, and then yeah, that's it, install web server, and updated the records, and we can see those records on the RDS server. Okay, that is the first hands-on exercise. Now the second hands-on exercise, we will create a Microsoft SQL Server DB instance. Let me go to my AWS for that. Let me go to databases, select option create a database. Okay, we saw about MariaDB, we saw MySQL. Okay, now we will look into Microsoft SQL Server. Let's say select Microsoft SQL Server. I'll say SQL Server Express Edition is fine. Okay, database name, demo for lab. Okay, admin username is fine. I'll give a password as, okay, and I'm giving this password. All right. Connectivity, do not connect to a EC2 instance because I will not connect to this database from EC2 instance. Instead, I will connect from my laptop. So if I have to connect from a laptop, I need to have a public access. So I'm giving a public access. Default is fine. Okay. And then enable Microsoft Server Windows authentication. So how do you authenticate this particular database? Okay, I will not choose Windows authentication. Let me go ahead. Okay, rest all, let us leave it for defaults and select option create database. Invalid password. Okay, let me change that. I think I have given special characters like at the rate. All right, and let me create a database. By the time by this database is created, let me see there is a uh, SSMS on my system or not. Go to SSMS, which is called as Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio. This is a tool that will help us to connect to that particular database. Okay, this tool is coming up. Let it come up. By the time the database will also be created. Okay, this is going to take a moment time for the Management Studio to come up. Okay, now this is how it is looking, right? So now we have to give something called as SQL Server authentication because that is what the username and password that we have created. And the username, I think I have given as admin, and the password, this is the password. And what is the server name? Server name will be uh, the endpoint. Okay. Let me see whether the database is created or not. Okay, database is still creating. Let us wait for a minute here so that we can directly connect, because for this database I have given a public access, but ideally we will not give a public access. What we can do, we can create a Windows EC2 instance on AWS, and download SSMS on that particular instance and then connect to the database. But I'm connecting from my local laptop. Okay, this database instance is still creating. Let us wait for a moment. The database is still creating. Okay, if you look now, the status is backing up. Let us wait for another 10-15 seconds. Now, even if it is backing up, there is this endpoint that is created. Okay, let me go to, yeah, now it is available. Let me go to SSMS. Now, let me give this here and select option connect. Now, if you see here, you can see this database that I have created. And now you can right click on that. If you want to connect, you can connect. If you want to disconnect, you can disconnect. And if you see the databases, okay, this is the database which is there. And if you see the tables, there is no tables here. Let's say, let us create one database in this. Okay, right click on the database, can select new database. Okay, give a name to the database. Let's say my new DB. Okay, select OK. The database is created. Let me refresh here. You see here, my new DB is here. Or else you can say a new query. Okay, select create database, and let's give a database name, demo DB. Okay, and run this, execute. Okay, now I'm able to create a database successfully. If you want to create a table, create table. Now you see on the top, in whichever database that you want to create the table, you can change the database. Now let's say I want to create this in demo DB. Okay, select demo DB on the top. Create table, table name, let's say EMP, and in that I need, let's say, ID, which is int, and name, which is varchar. All right. There's a syntax error. Let me put a comma there, and then semicolon. Let me run this. Execute. Okay, now a table is created in a database by name demo DB. Let me refresh this. Okay, it's loading. Just give it a minute. Now you see there is this demo DB database. If I expand, let me go to tables. I can see this table, and let me run a script. Uh, Let me write a simple select statement. Okay. So it is very easy from the UI. Now you see this is already executed and it is showing the ID and name. There is no data in that, so it is showing that. All right. That is how you can connect to a SQL Server by using SSMS. All right, let us recap the session. In this particular session, we understood how to create a web server and connect that with the RDS database. We chose MySQL as the database engine, and we understood how to create a Microsoft Server DB instance and connect that by using SSMS. All right, that's all for this session. See you guys in the next session. Take care.